Welcome to your in-depth weekly astrology overview and zodiac forecast for week commencing the 6th of January. I'm going to share some standout details to look out for, then on screen the event chart right at the start of the week. That always provides some important context and a backdrop for the whole 7 days. Then as influences feed in, I'll go through those in detail before sharing each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, which you can relate to in terms of your ascendant, sun or the moon. Sometimes people ask, what do I watch? Particularly the ascendant or the sun. If you know your natal astrology and your house overlays, the ascendant will give you a lot of extra insights. But do you know, even if you do, the sun is the core of us, and it's something that's always worth checking out, even if you're really keen on natal astrology. If you're new to my channel, it's a pleasure to have you with us. This is very much a community. Please do comment if you have any thoughts. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please help it grow. Click that sub button, but also the bell notification symbol. You can get your free daily written horoscope fired to your device each morning by clicking on the link below. And if you'd like to have a one-to-one with me and explore what year 2025 will hold for you in detail, please see the link below where you can check out my testimonials and also take advantage of my personal horoscope offer, 30% off, by seeing the link below too. This week begins with Mars, the planet of passion, of action and of desire, inverting into the feeling sign of Cancer. The retrograde has been ongoing for some while and does continue through to the 24th of February. So Mars, when it's in retrograde, can create frustration, but it starts this week in a powerful opposition to Pluto in Aquarius before inverting into the sign of Cancer. I will unpack the significance of that for you. Also, at the start of this week, Mercury is still in a rather tangled web with Neptune, but by the heart of the week, Mercury arrives in Capricorn. What does that mean? I'll share that with you too. Now, the Sun is going to be forging a sparkling alliance to Uranus later in the week. Brilliant for innovation, but certainly innovation that has some kind of tangible outcome. But we also have a square at the start of this week between the Sun and the moon, a quarter moon in Aries, and later in the week it's the turn of Chiron to be squaring up to the sun. Now the sun in Capricorn is desirous of us following convention. The energy in Aries, which is being accentuated by the North Node, Chiron, and the eclipse series over the last 18 months, that's been pushing us to get more in touch with me energy. But of course, by the end of this week, the North Node on Friday, based on universal time, inverts into the feeling sign of Pisces. It's going to join up with respectively Neptune, Saturn and also Venus. I'll unpack that for you too. On the screen now, I'm showing the event chart, and you can see that opposition between Mars and Pluto. Pluto can be about revelations, but it can definitely be about power. But in the sign of Aquarius, it's asking us to be more mindful of our future direction, but also how we connect collectively to one another, because the sign of Aquarius is about us all. It is about humanity, if you like. Whereas Mars in the sign of Leo can be very prideful, and since the 4th of November in that sign, there may have been some tensions where if we've wanted something in a big way and someone else has seen things in a different way, that has created some kind of conflict, a proverbial arm wrestle. And that could be part of the start of this week's story. But you know, those two positions do forge an amazing link to the moon, and also the North Node coming to the end of its journey in Aries right at the start of this week. So if you're someone who's trying to use the willpower of Mars opposite Pluto in a positive way, particularly if you're good at connecting and networking to people, but you can still express your individual talent, this can be a very dynamic start to the week. But do look at the position of Mercury there in Sagittarius, which is the sign of knowledge. But Mercury is detrimented there at times. It finds it difficult to stick with the details, but it is in a direct right angle with Neptune through to the heart of this week. So right at the start of this week, anything to do with documents or contracts, or even perhaps someone we're encountering who's not necessarily up front, maybe even someone who's a bit of a gossip, could cause some mischief. I've also like to share about Saturn and Jupiter. You can see they're continuing their square, which peaked on the 24th of December last year. Jupiter's about growth, but it's in retrograde through to the 3rd of February. Saturn's more about restraint. You put those two together, you're slowing things down. So that takes us to Mars. So later on Monday, Mars inverts into Cancer, where he's going to be through to the 18th of April. But it will emerge from the retrograde on the 24th of February. But Mars in Cancer is in its full. So it can make us perhaps a bit defensive, niggly, moody, up and down, particularly if someone does want to confront us. But it's also a great opportunity to use the drive of Mars to make progress around, for example, home-based plans. So if something has stalled that's important to you in terms of an improvement, a redecoration, or perhaps even making progress and understanding the emotional dynamic in your world, Mars can still be very helpful. And in fact, in the early part of this week, Mars is forging a very convivial link to Neptune in Pisces. If we use the drive of Mars to help others through an act of benevolence, thoughtfulness, or perhaps helping a good cause, why not? That's a lovely thing to do. But by Wednesday, Mercury makes its way into the practical sign of Capricorn, joining up with the Sun. Mercury here is terrific for business interests. If you do need to have a meeting, perhaps one that's been delayed, things can really start to move forwards, and that can be something that helps you gain traction. However, towards the end of this week, the Sun's square to Chiron could see us needing to toggle what's expected of us, the Sun in Capricorn, and what we're really craving for as individuals. But by the end of the week, as the Sun forges an enlightened link to Uranus, doing something which is inventive, Uranus, and different in the sign of money and values of Taurus, can work well as long as we use the thoroughness, practicality, and systematic approach and responsible approach of the Sun in Capricorn. But by Friday, based on universal time, late in the day, the nodal axis, the North Node, the point of destiny, inverts into the sign of Pisces. And as it does, it is merging with both the Moon and Neptune. That's a mighty, mighty combination, but they are squaring up to Mercury. So the potential for confusion that was there at the start of the week is there at the end of the week too. But in terms of the big picture, Saturn has been rather oppressive in the sign of Pisces since March 2023. Having the North Node arrive in this area can, over time, offset some of that more limiting energy. But we are going to have to work at it. Essentially, the North Node going into Pisces asks us to celebrate vulnerability, celebrate sensitivity, get in touch with our deeper motivations, be more aware of perhaps what we need to let go of. It is more to do with vulnerability and spirituality. On the other side of the heavens, the South Node in the practical Virgo could encourage us to stay with the practical responses to life, keeping things very ordered and systematic, but it could see us missing an opportunity. So for us all, over the next year and a half, it is important to improve our health outcomes by being much more conscious of how our mind, our psyche, and our emotion impacts our physical well-being. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. If you've yet to watch your deep dive forecast for year 2025, please see the link beneath each video to watch yours now. So Aries, your week commencing the 6th of January forecast begins in dramatic fashion with your ruler Mars continuing its opposition to Pluto initially. But even when it inverts into Cancer later on Monday, it's still within a couple of degrees of that conflict, because essentially Mars and Pluto are the two planets of strife. They're also the ruling planets of the sign of Scorpio. If you have been finding it a bit difficult to balance what you want as an individual, the 5th house energy of the Mars position in Leo, and what someone else wants from you in terms of a collaboration or a friendship, that may have shown up. But if you're unsure about where to live, how to live there, who with, about anything to do with a structural issue in terms of improving a property, you could find yourself rather frustrated perhaps through to the 18th of April, or you can submit particularly through to the 24th of February while the retrograde's still ongoing, to understand that there may be some inner work that is valuable for you to proceed with. But there is also at the start of this week that tangle between Mercury, which for you is in a very explorative part of your chart, the 9th house, could stimulate your appetite for travel. That's in a sluggish right angle to Neptune. There may be someone around you, or there may be information that you're absorbing that's actually not very good for your soul. I think it's important to be a bit more protective, and Mars in its retrograde in Cancer can help you to be precisely that. But if you do need to speak to someone about a more worldly, practical, or financial issue, the planet of commerce, Mercury, moving to the top of your chart on Wednesday will certainly help that process. In fact, it joins with the Sun, which itself forges a stunning angle to Uranus towards the end of this week. Innovation isn't usually something we think about in terms of Capricorn. Capricorn is much more to do with sustaining what's well established and traditional. But it's also about leadership roles. It can be about goals and ambitions. And if you change your approach and flex and perhaps try some different techniques, it could actually present a golden opportunity towards the end of this week. But of course, Jupiter, the planet of knowledge, does continue a right angle with Saturn. So I feel the square between Mercury and Neptune, and also Jupiter and Saturn, suggests steer clear of anyone this week who tends to be a little bit loose in terms of confidentialities. And if there are people around you who tend to be a bit draining energetically, that's also where you may want to keep your boundaries more firmly in place, particularly because the quarter moon on Monday in your sign, followed by the square between Chiron in your sign and the Sun on Thursday, is saying that, you know, it's important to understand the benefits that the North Node has given you over the last year and a half as it's made its way through your sign. But at times, what you need as an individual might not quite conform with what other people's expectations are. So you could encounter a bit of that this week too. But on Friday, as late in the day, the North Node particularly inverts out of your sign and into Pisces. That's a very powerful event, particularly as it immediately aligns with the Moon and Neptune. You could find yourself towards the end of this week actually wanting to keep the demands of the world very much at an arm's length. Although you have Venus in your 12th house, it's been Saturn over the last couple of years that I think has been particularly bruising. There may have been some big events in your situation that have been very tender, but the North Node moving there can give you the opportunity to unravel, unpick, or to really embrace the concept of additional healing in your situation. But with Venus in your 12th house, if there is a relationship which lacks sincerity, you're not absolutely sure you can rely upon someone, as this week draws to a close, that need to just step back and shelter or go somewhere that's quieter, more reflective and peaceful can be very strong indeed. Have a great week, Aries, and if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this one. So Taurus, your week commencing the 6th of January forecast begins with Mars inverting into the part of your chart to do with everyday ideas, but it's going to make you, I think, potentially a lot more active right through to the 18th of April. Now, if you're someone who's already very athletic, you're a naturally fast-moving person, then perhaps you're just going to become even more invested in that lifestyle. But if you're someone who's more of a born-again couch potato, this could be just the push you need to engage with some of those New Year's resolutions that seem to be a good idea, but may have just slipped to the back of your mind. But seriously, Mars moving into the 3rd house can give you a restless desire to be more active. But it does start this week still in that very delicate opposition between Mars in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius before moving later on Monday in the inversion back into Cancer. If you have found that there's a professional or worldly situation that's not quite working for you, you may have felt very tender about that recently. But what you're going to find from the start of this week is your voice. And that voice will get stronger, particularly once Mercury moves into your sister Earth sign of Capricorn on Wednesday. Because if it is a matter of fairness, or it's a matter of a contract, the need to clearly state what you see and what you feel is right for you is definitely going to be emphasized. Now, you do have Venus in the part of your situation to do with friendships, and those friendships can be very gratifying, but also at times, maybe over the last couple of years, there have also been some disappointments. And one of the areas that disappointments could show up around friendships at the moment is where your values don't align. And that's because Saturn continues its right angle to Jupiter. So if you're too optimistic about what the outcome can be, say for example, you want to work with someone you know well, it would be critically important to have very clear terms of reference. But then again, perhaps an idea you've had that you've thought was really exciting to revive your long-term fortunes may in some ways not quite be gathering or gaining the traction that you would like. But the best way to move forwards is through gaining more information. And I think Mercury will help that, and also the Sun's sparkling alliance to Uranus towards the end of this week. But it could require you to take a step into the unknown, because there's part of your nature, Taurus, in spite of Pluto being in your 9th house for many years, since 2008, and Uranus in your sign 4 times since March 2019, that does like to stick with what's familiar. And later in the week, that's what you're being asked to challenge. But you do get a major celestial help, because late on Friday, based on universal time, the North Node, the point of destiny, is going to pull you into some new, exciting opportunities over the next year and a half. And as much as Saturn may have made you more conscious of who you can't network with, you can't rely on, and there may have been some disappointments around certain friendships or group activities over these last couple of years, the people who are good for you are going to be revealed over this next 18 months. And that is truly exciting. But it's important that you're open to the process of change, because particularly professionally, with Pluto right at the top of your chart, staying as you have been is really not going to be an option. Have a great week, Taurus. And if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this one. So Gemini, your week commencing the 6th of January forecast begins with a quarter moon in your sector of friendship. That's squaring up to the sun in your 8th house. If there is somebody, particularly in a social grouping, who tends to be a bit clingy or possessive, that may be something that you could strongly resist. And you probably won't hold back from asserting your thoughts about this matter because of the final opposition between Mars and Pluto across your 3rd and 9th houses. Perhaps part of the issue is about money, or if it isn't about money, that your values don't quite align to that other person. But with Mars inverting into Cancer through to the 18th of April, you're going to have a period of time when you'll be thinking about what's important to you in terms of your life foundations, taking action to try to improve your income, but also you may actually adjust and amend some of your outlook. So when Mars and Pluto come back into an opposition across the signs of Leo and Aquarius again, which will be from the latter part of April, you might be surprised that you could have a different take. But as this week goes on, Mercury, your ruler, which starts the week in a muddled right angle to Neptune, just cautions you that if you're doing a presentation, having an interview, talking to someone in a position of influence, that you keep your message really clear. By Wednesday, Mercury moves into the sign of Capricorn. Now, actually, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to don your detective mat, turn up your collar and do some deep diving when it comes to information, and your ability to penetrate right down to the core of whichever subject that you're investigating is going to be awesome. Don't be surprised also if you find yourself wanting to read a crime novel or watch one of those series on TV where they use forensics to unlock mysteries. But seriously, as this week goes on, Mars first of all links in a very compassionate way with Neptune. But the Sun in Capricorn, very much about shared resources, long-term financial planning, and a more spiritual evolution, links with Uranus in your 12th house. There may be something from your past that could be remodeled and reapplied in a fresh way, which can stimulate the income that Mars inverting into your 2nd house on Monday and the Sun in your 8th house of long-term finances would really welcome. But there's also the potential for a delicate moment on Thursday as the Sun squares up with Chiron. If someone around you energetically is proving to be a little draining, it may be someone that you're very fond of. You could be in some ways asked to be a bit more single-minded about protecting your boundaries. But over the last couple of years, Saturn has been asking some big questions around your professional and worldly aspirations. If you're someone who's very, very motivated, has a clear plan, doesn't mind taking on responsibility, and is very ambitious, the endeavour and application that Saturn has encouraged you to invest could be rewarded at this time with Venus in this part of your chart, because Venus is about money as well as relationships. And also Venus here can see you use your diplomacy and quick wits in order to cultivate a good impression on someone. But by the end of the week, as the North Node, the point of destiny, moves into your 10th house, you're given an opportunity over the next couple of years to make even greater progress, because for some people, I think Saturn may have slowed things down. But the key is the role of the South Node, because your emotional needs and responses, but also fears and vulnerabilities, could in some ways be inhibiting your progress in terms of being more dynamic. And that's a big question that the node will ask you in this part of your chart over the next year and a half. Also, as the North Node first moves into the sign of Pisces, it's very sensitive. And if there are some politics in your professional or worldly interactions, I would steer a little bit clear of anyone who tends to be tricky to deal with. So the start of this week with your ruler Mercury compromised by Neptune, and the end of this week suggests that you're a bit cute when it comes to dealing with those potential office politics. And if there are people you can steer completely clear of, then do so. But if you are intent on refocusing your work, your responsibilities and obligations, the North Node is going to be a big part of that journey over the next year and a half. Have a great week, Gemini. And if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this one. So Cancer, your week commencing the 6th of January forecast begins with initially Mars and Pluto in an opposition across the axis in your personal situation to do with everyday money, Leo with Mars, and shared resources, Pluto with Aquarius. But if we go back to the 5th of September through to the 4th of November, Mars was in your sign, and later on Monday is going to invert back into your sign through to the 18th of April. Now that's going to fire you up and give you an opportunity to be very single-minded, particularly around creative interests, manifesting what makes you unique. And it's going to give your physical vitality, potentially, even with the retrograde through to the 24th of February, an extra dimension. The key is to really focus the energy of Mars in a very precise way. But if you're or have encountered someone who sees something very differently to you, it wouldn't be a surprise. But equally, you may have enjoyed a very passionate attraction to someone over the last couple of months. That's entirely possible too. But within that attraction, there may have been some politics. So you may have found someone utterly irresistible, but whether you found them quite so easy to get along with is another matter. And whether it is in a romantic dimension or a colleague or a friend, really Mars inverted back into your sign asks you to be more single-minded. Now, you are a nurturer, and in fact, Mars is going to be forging a gorgeous link with Neptune, which can have a spiritual dimension in the first half of this week. And perhaps it's your leadership skills that's going to see you working with other people, perhaps those who are less fortunate. But then again, you could be the leader around a plan to travel somewhere, get together with like-minded people. So it's very exciting, but there are some complexities threaded in there too. Now, what about Mercury? Mercury's been in the part of your situation to do with practicalities for an extended period, but it has made it difficult. And if you have felt a little ragged around your nervous system at times, particularly through the retrograde late November to mid-December, and also the pre and post retrograde shadows, not really a surprise. Perhaps just getting life running as organised as you would normally like has proved elusive too. And at the start of this week, you could find yourself a little bit compromised between what you'd like to do as a free spirit and what someone expects you to do. That said, at the heart of the week, Mercury moves into your opposite sign. Now, if you have found with Mercury's journey through Sagittarius that at times things have been a bit brittle, you felt a bit snappy or irritable, or little issues have just aggravated you more than would ordinarily be the case. The great thing about Mercury moving into your opposite sign, it gets easier to be more dispassionate about people seeing things in different ways. But of course, The seventh house, Capricorn, for you is also an area of where you can connect. And there could be an excellent connection that starts to build up from the heart of this week. In fact, if you're someone who's very open to different approaches, more novel or unique strands, Uranus has been emphasizing that since March 2019. There may be someone you can collaborate with in the second half of this week who could prove to be very fortunate for you. But Jupiter, the planet of growth, does continue in your 12th house, which is excellent for heightening our awareness around the spiritual realm, but it is in a right angle with Saturn, the planet of limitation. So those obligations that I feel that Mercury has been emphasizing, there could be other obligations which seem to limit your freedom to be yourself, but they may be ones that you find hard to resist. So helping those, for example, who are less fortunate may be something that's important to you, and that obviously is something very laudable. But your ambition sector, which has been underpinned by in order the North Node, Chiron, but also the eclipse series in Aries over the last year and a half in particular, at the very start of this week, finding that tip point between getting what you need in terms of recognition but making your relationships work well could be a little challenging. And there could be another moment of that with the Sun square with Chiron on Thursday. But then, as the week draws to a close, there's the switch of the nodal axis. And for you, the North Node, the point of destiny, which is almost like a collective energy which is dragging us all towards a new possibility, begins in the sign of Pisces, which of course is your sister water sign. You've had Cancer, you've had Venus, moved there last week, and Venus in that ninth house energy, wonderful for travel and experiencing a higher truth, if you like. But Saturn has made that area quite punishing at times over the last couple of years. If you have gone through some litigation, a contractual issue, there's been something that has in some ways impinged on your values. I think it's important with the North Node to understand that that actually can be an asset. It's also the case that the North Node is going to align broadly with Saturn through the springtime in the Northern Hemisphere and the autumn in the South. So some of those things that you feel very strongly about in terms of your values may in some ways have another outcome that's not absolutely expected, and that's to come for you. But by the end of this week, if you are someone who loves film, music, exploration, the arts, travel, really tripping the light fantastic can be something that gives you a lot of uplift as the North Node merges with the Moon, but also with Neptune. But they do, in so doing, square up with Mercury. So even though Mercury is in that new part of its journey in the sign of Capricorn, there is a disassociate square. So just be aware of that. Have a great week, Cancer. And if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this one. So Leo, your week commencing the 6th of January forecast begins with Mars in your sign, still in that opposition to Pluto, which peaked last week. It is possible that something you feel very, very strongly about, and it may be around a relationship matter, is causing some tension with the other side. And it's because potentially you have a different relationship to the issue itself. Because Mars inverts back into your 12th house, where it arrived on the 5th of September through to the 4th of November, if you think back to that period of time, and particularly on the 3rd of November, when Mars and Pluto went into the first opposition, that may be when the issue that's just peaked really started to build up. You're being asked through to the 18th of April to in some ways go into a period of very deep reflection, which in some ways seems very counterintuitive to a sign like yours, which can have such a charismatic interface with other people. But Mars in the 12th house is a very powerful influence, and it's going to be in retrograde through to the 24th of February. So there's a delicate change right at the start of this week, something you feel very strongly about, then can feel very emotionally impactful upon you. And maybe you're going to find out that someone has a different set of values to you, and maybe there is also some information that's been withheld from you. Mars in the 12th house is terrific for understanding our deeper desires, but it can also see issues from the past be ignited, issues that we may have felt that we dealt with long ago. So at times we can feel suddenly very angry, at other times very sensitive, even all the way to crying. So just be aware that through to the 18th of April, this is a time when you may not feel quite as up to manifesting that more outgoing, independent, charismatic part of your nature. And if that's the case, don't beat yourself up about it. In fact, at the start of this week, Mercury, which has been making its way through a very playful and social part of your situation, but in so doing, being in a retrograde and forging a number of seriously challenging angles, not least to Saturn, and it is in another one to Neptune at the start of this week. So trying to cut through the information that you have and make sense of it could prove elusive. But you get an opportunity to do that from Wednesday. Mercury moves into a drier part of your chart, but one which can help you to analyse the detail. Events can start to go through your mind, and you can really look at them in a frame by frame way. It's also a great time if you have been thinking about getting more virtuous in terms of your diet or fitness routines, to engage with that plan in a much more meaningful way. But if your personal situation is pretty cool at the moment, but you're wanting to make progress around your professional or worldly interaction, as this week goes on, the Sun in the practical but ambitious Capricorn links with Uranus, the planet of change and innovation, in the most visible part of your scope. There could be an opportunity professionally that just comes out of nowhere, and it may be incredibly exciting for you. And you know that Mars in the 12th house suggests that this can be linked to someone influential that you had contact with in the past. Could be an old colleague, an old boss, but equally Mars in the 12th house can help you to dive deep into your past and bring up old talents and experiences in a fresh way. So there can be positives with that, and the link between the Sun and Uranus can certainly help you to showcase them. But of course Jupiter, the planet of growth, optimism and fortune, is still in a square with Saturn. Saturn over the last couple of years has brought a more scrutinizing energy to anything you share or anything where you're deeply invested, emotionally, financially, romantically. But Jupiter is in a retrograde still, and I think when it comes to certain friendships, if you are planning any kind of collaborative ventures where investment is going to be made, you really do need to make sure that you use Mercury in Capricorn to pick over the details in a very precise way. There's another dynamic playing out for you this week, Leo, that part of you that's been very self-sacrificing, particularly since 2008, there may be some resentment around that could come up this week, not least with the Quarter Moon, but also with Chiron on Thursday. If you feel that you've given up some of your personal freedom in order to support others, and then someone hasn't been as honourable or as trustworthy as you would like, That could be a major part of what's percolating away deep within your emotions. But if you do need to understand those very meaningful connections with others by Friday, late on Friday Universal Time, we do have the North Node, the point of destiny, inverting into Pisces, but it does link with Neptune and the Moon. That's a very, very sensitive combination. So just be aware that the emotional transformations that are possible with Mars in the feeling sign of Cancer, where it's not at its best, but also for you, the 12th house, which is particularly tender and psychological. There may be something that you need to work through, and you may need some privacy and time alone as this week draws to a close. Have a great week, Leo. And if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this one. So Virgo, your week commencing the 6th of January forecast begins with a big change. Mars, the planet of drive, of passion, assertion, inverses back for you into the part of your chart to do with where you can connect to others. Because, you know, since the 4th of November, you may have found that you haven't been connecting to people quite as charismatically as is usually the case. Not least, your ruler Mercury has also been making its way through the 4th house of your situation, very much to do with where you live, how you feel, but it has forged some tricky right angles to Saturn and Neptune, which have been repeated because of Mercury's retrograde. Now, Mercury starts this week in a tangled square with Neptune again, and a relationship matter which has felt confusing could hot up. But because Venus last week moved into this area, you can unlock the solution to this, and particularly from Wednesday when your ruler moves into a far more outgoing and bubbly part of your chart. But it's Mars having been locked away in your 12th house, which has been so challenging. So its return to Cancer through to the 18th of April, despite its retrograde through to the 24th of February, is going to reinvigorate your desire to make those connections, because I think it's possible that some very deep stuff has been coming up, perhaps to do with your past, perhaps old hurts, resentments, rejections, losses. You may have been surprised by how sensitive but also how triggered you felt at times. Now, as this week goes on, Mars forges a beautiful link to Neptune in your opposite sign, so the tangle at the start of the week can make way for some letting go. It may be important to forgive someone, for example, that hasn't a situation that hasn't gone exactly as you would like. But Mercury's move into your sister Earth sign of Capricorn is going to reinvigorate your sense of fun. You're going to feel more playful. What about your professional situation? Jupiter, the planet of fortune, does continue its retrograde, and it is still in a tense standoff with Saturn. There may be someone you work with who's still a rather cool customer, someone who doesn't seem to give you the breaks, and that could be rather testing. Keep the lines of communication open. I think that's critically important, because by the end of this week, by Friday, based on Universal, the North Node, the point of destiny, is inversing back into your sector of relating. This is a huge opportunity. The North Node hasn't been in this area for 17 years. It's a chance for you to push back against some of the constraints of Saturn of the last couple of years and the confusion of Neptune since 2012. But this is a week also where Mars gives you the chance to get more motivated, particularly if you feel you have been treading water, not really felt very dynamic, not found it easy to find thrust and direction in your situation. So, taken in the whole, a much brighter week for you. Have a great week, Virgo, and if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this one. So Libra, your week commencing the 6th of January forecast begins with a square between the Sun and the Moon. The Moon's in the part of your situation as the week begins, which is very much to do with relating. That's an area that you have a talent for, but because of the position of the Sun in the 4th house, someone close to you, could be a family member, may seem a little bit switched off to however much you're trying to lean into their needs, or conversely, they could be far too demanding. The great news, however, is that later on Monday, Mars, the planet of passion and drive, which has been in a very social part of your situation, inverts into a part of your chart that's to do with authority. And that authority is really going to manifest itself in a very powerful way through to the 18th of April. If you are wanting to punch through any resistance around your goals and ambitions you've been encountering, your determination to do so can be absolutely incredible. But it's also important, with Neptune having helped to enable your compassion and support skills since 2012, to balance the thrust of Mars with the sensitivity of Neptune, and that is something you can do as the week goes on. But if there has been some kind of tangle around who or what is contributed in a situation, that can start to be unpicked by Wednesday as Mercury moves into Capricorn. Mercury in the 4th house can see us circulating thoughts in our minds, but finding it more difficult to express our emotions. But I think for you, because the Sun in the sign of Capricorn is now 3 of the energy of Pluto and links very constructively to Uranus as this week goes on, you can use Mercury in a very constructive way if you're wanting to make some physical changes to your home, particularly if you work from home, you have a home-based business. And Uranus is a freedom lover, so it's a great opportunity later this week to declutter your home, free up space of the items that no longer serve a practical benefit to you. But there's no doubt about it, over the last couple of years, Saturn has been testing your stamina, and there's been a lot of demands. And if some of those demands continue to be unrelenting, the square off with Jupiter could see you feeling a bit resentful as the week goes on. And because Chiron, the so-called wounded healer, is asking you to stand up your authority in Aries, but also in a way that connects you to people, but squares off with the Sun on Thursday. If there is something where you feel you're doing more than others, it's a great opportunity to set boundaries. You can do so using your natural diplomacy, but if someone has been taking advantage of your goodwill, you do need to push back. And the North Node's arrival on Friday, late in the day, based on Universal, is a chance over the next year and a half to really try to define more clearly the balance between the give and the get. For you, the North Node's in a practical area, the South Node's in a spiritual area, so there's a flip between what everyone else collectively will experience. But with Neptune in that part of your chart, along with Saturn and your ruler Venus, this is a week where, for sure, celebrate how much you've done to help others, but it's also important to let other people know what you need too. And the quarter moon at the start of the week, the Chiron square with the Sun at the end of the week, but most of all, Mars enabling your voice of authority gives you an opportunity to say what you need to say in a way that other people can respect, but most of all, react to positively. Have a great week, Libra, and if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this one. So Scorpio, your week commencing the 6th of January forecast begins with the potential for a very powerful clash. This may have actually reached a climax in the week before this one, and with Mars, which is your traditional ruler, inverting into your sister water sign later on Monday, what that can trigger within you is a desire to actually escape a situation which is proving to be very complex and potentially also very hard to resolve. Part of the issue might be that another person has seen you as being very intransigent, perhaps wanting, as they see it, to be very dominant in a situation. But it's also possible that you feel that you felt very vulnerable and have found it that it's them that have been difficult. So it's a very complex situation. But Mars inverting into your sister water sign of Cancer could also see you gain some knowledge and advice, particularly through to the 24th of February through its retrograde, by rethinking some of your approach to this complex issue. For some Scorpios, I think this may be a classic work-life balance. So if you're working very, very hard and perhaps someone close to you is finding it difficult to see what your aims are, why you're doing that, that could be the complexity. On the other hand, maybe you're working hard supporting someone else's ambitions and that's not quite working for you. But someone can provide some independent but also very helpful input to this situation. It could be a life coach, it could be a counsellor, it could be an accountant, it could be a business coach. It just depends on your unique situation. But another part of your nature may actually want to liberate yourself and have some more physical free space, particularly with Mercury, the planet of communication, moving into the sign of Capricorn on Wednesday, but most of all the Sun in that sign linking to Uranus in your sector of relating. So there could be quite a frank exchange at the end of this week. And if a relationship, for example, has been bumping along the bottom, perhaps the natural thing to do will be to give one another a little bit of airspace so that you can collect your thoughts. And that may be something that would work well. But Saturn does continue in your sector of romance, and it does also continue in a square with Jupiter in the 8th house of devotion. So something isn't working very well, or there are squabbles over money. Those can manifest too as this week goes on. But the return of the North Node, the point of destiny, into your sister water sign of Pisces after a 17-year absence on Friday late in the day is a truly seminal moment. You could feel very, very emotional. If you're single, it could be a time that you encounter someone who really makes your pulse race. In fact, there could be a very electric connection towards the end of this week. But for many Scorpios, there's part of you that likes to have a degree of continuity in your life. But when your two rulers are in mortal combat, like they have been recently, first of all on the 3rd of November, then again last week, the 3rd of January, it's really bringing into the open some kind of power imbalance in some part of your situation that will need to be looked at. And one of the ways you could do that is to remove yourself from that situation, but it won't necessarily solve it. And that's where seeking knowledge or watching videos that help you to get a better understanding of your situation can be so helpful. But for Scorpios where things are going well, there could be the opportunity to head off on some kind of travel or adventurous plan, particularly by the end of this week. And it could be like a breath of celestial air. Have a great week, Scorpio. And if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this one. So Sagittarius, your week commencing the 6th of January forecast begins with your ruler Jupiter, still in retrograde in your sector of relating, still in a tense right angle with Saturn, the planet of structure but also of limitation in the part of your chart to do with how you feel about things. If there is a relationship, therefore, that isn't quite flowing, despite the fact that Venus moved into the part of your chart that's to do with your emotional expression last week, that can still be something that's very much to the fore. In fact, in certain situations, the outright opposition right at the start of this week between Mars and Pluto, which peaked last week, could still be having an impact. Now, you're someone with a vast appreciation of knowledge and a vast appetite to download more and more. And perhaps that's part of the problem. Whoever you're trying to relate to may find you rather intimidating because of how passionate and knowledgeable you are. Or maybe the problem is that a particular involvement has just become for you a little bit dull and unstimulating. So, something to do with a restriction or a power play around ideas, or because someone sees something very starkly different to you, could be the starting point of this week, and it could be feeding into a sense that this relationship isn't working. But then later on Monday, Mars inverts out of Leo and back into the sign of Cancer. It's been here before, if you remember, from pretty well the start of September through to the start of November. It was really pushing you to, in some ways, meet some kind of desire, maybe a desire for change, maybe a desire for an intense romantic encounter. But it's going to be in this area, despite the retrograde, through to the 18th of April. But the 8th house can be where, in some ways, particularly with Mars in the mix, where we want to provoke something to see what the potential outcome can be. So we can be risk-taking, or we can be a little bit blunter in our approach because we want a reaction that brings us to life. And if you are someone who generally avoids that kind of approach, that's different for you. But maybe you're yearning for something to take shape, particularly in your emotional life, even if that's not the conscious thought you have. And part of the reason for the confusion at the start of this week could be because Mercury in your sign is squaring up with the dreamy, drifting energies of Neptune. But Mercury moves on after a long period of occupation with you, which, if you recall, even was at the start of 2024, and moves into Capricorn. If you have been experimenting over the last year with some new ideas, you're going to start to see how these can shape up in a more practical way. In fact, practical ideas linked to fresh approaches could really see you explode forwards and improve your financial situation, but it may require you to flex. So there may be an opportunity to earn more money, but you may need to be more experimental or to adapt your daily structure in order to take advantage of it. But by the end of this week, the thing that Saturn, Neptune, and more recently Venus have been asking you to do, which is get more in touch with your feelings, your home life, your emotional life. That's accentuated by the arrival of the North Node, late on Friday, universal. It also meets almost immediately with the energy of Neptune. You could find yourself, despite whatever happens early in the week, which may be an all-out disagreement, you could find yourself by the end of this week feeling a lot more sensitive, all the way to very vulnerable. But if that's the case, don't judge yourself, Sagittarius, because as much as that knowledge-based part of your nature, that part of you that loves to travel, loves to do daring and exciting things, is very much part of the DNA of your nature, there is a very deep trend in your situation at the moment, which is asking you to become much more in touch with who you are at a deeper emotional level. And if you resist that and continue to just engage in the realm of ideas, beliefs, and at times disagreements over those things, that may disguise the reason why some of those debates happen, which could be at a much deeper level within your psyche. Have a great week, Sagittarius, and if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this one. So Capricorn, your week commencing the 6th of January forecast is going to see Mercury, the planet of communication, dart back into your sign on Wednesday. And you know, I feel it is going to be a very welcome development, because Mercury has been making its way through your 12th house from the start of 2024 to the end of the year. It even starts this week in a tangled relationship with Neptune. And there may be something that does cause some confusion because of that. Maybe even some gossip doing the rounds. But Mercury moving into your sign is going to help you to bring you into the moment. And also, if there is something that just seems to have trodden water for weeks and weeks and weeks, and there has been a sense of inertia, things can start to pick up. Also, on Monday, the big power battle between Pluto and Mars, which may have seen some kind of issue around shared finance, or maybe you have had some kind of fascination with someone, but whether it's actually been good for your soul is another matter. But Mars inverting into your 7th house suggests you'll be able to mark out your boundary better. Even if you don't feel you can do it straight away, know the window of opportunity to do so will be through to the 18th of April, and it could bring a stunning development around a relationship. It doesn't have to be a romantic involvement. It could be some kind of connection where you have a shared interest. And in fact, as early as the first half of this week, Mars is linked to Neptune, suggesting there is someone where you have a common cause, an interest, something you can collaborate or cooperate with. That also can come to life in a very productive way. But when it comes to boundaries, Mars on the 7th house can make it a bit tricky around relationships, because particularly in a natal chart, it can make people so assertive that it's difficult for them to bend and find those points of agreement. But you do have Venus, the planet of diplomacy, in the part of your chart now to do with everyday conversation, another asset to bring into this week. But it's important with the quarter moon at the start of this week to try to stay objective around home, family and more emotional issues. But as the week goes on, the sun in your sign does link brilliantly to Uranus. Uranus is the planet of change. It is a very provocative influence. It can be unsettling, but it can also see things happen quickly. You could initiate something this week that suddenly starts to move at the speed of light. It could be a business idea, could be a friendship, it could be around a hobby, it could be around your creative talents, but you're going to be starting to feel much more on form. Are there challenges? Well, to be fair, your ruler Saturn is still in a tense right angle with Jupiter. So Jupiter's in the part of your situation to do with generosity of spirit around the practical sphere, especially to do with your work. If there is someone who just always seems to want you to support them, but doesn't really acknowledge you, that's where Mars moving into your 7th house can help you to push back even on that tricky right angle. As the week goes on, if there is a tender family matter that has been around your situation that perhaps hasn't quite been resolved, the sun squaring up to Chiron gives you the chance to grapple with this. But on Friday, the nodal axis, particularly the North Node, the point of destiny, inverting into your 3rd house, suggests some of the wounding energy of the last couple of years with Saturn, your ruler, in Pisces, can be started to be offset by the more spiritual dimension of the North Node. But we do have some headwinds ahead, to be honest, as the node and Saturn come into an alliance. I will do a deep dive about this. But for you generally, I think your everyday communications, which have felt stilted and difficult and challenging in recent times, they can start to flow much better as this week draws to a close. Have a great week, Capricorn. And if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this one. So Aquarius, your week commencing the 6th of January forecast sees the potential for speedy exchanges of information, or it could see you learning something that you're not quite expecting. When it comes to the amount of information that is seeking our attention these days, inevitably at times we can get a bit overwhelmed. So it's important, if you're stepping forwards to assert your viewpoint on a situation that's important to you, that your facts are absolutely correct, because otherwise it could prove to be a little embarrassing. The fierce standoff between Mars and Pluto, which ends in terms of Mars being in your opposite sign on Monday, could be something that's been heating up for some while. And if you do see something different to someone else, don't necessarily expect them to front up their opinion in as direct and honest way as you might do. So unfortunately, there is the potential for some scheming, whether it is to do with work, to do with social media, to do with people immediately around you. Not everyone is necessarily going to say it as it is. So that's why do protect yourself by making sure that your viewpoints are iron cast in terms of the facts. Now, Mercury, the planet of communication, which has been in a very sociable part of your situation for some while, it's also in a tangle at the start of this week with Neptune. There could be some mixed signals or misunderstandings over a financial matter. Mercury's move on Wednesday into Capricorn gives you a chance to dive deep and do some extra research. Mars inverting into Cancer later on Monday gives you a chance to be more physically active and productive right through to the 18th of April. But the Sun is forging a great link to your modern ruler, Uranus, as this week goes on. And there may be a chance to use your past experience or knowledge to change something around your home. It may be actually that you do want to create just more space. If you're living somewhere that's too cramped, for example, that's something you can become painfully aware of. But there's part of you that may want to just step back, have some time to think with Mercury in the 12th house, and also because your traditional ruler Saturn is challenging Jupiter, the planet of opportunity, in the part of your chart to do with speculation, despite the fact that Venus may have brought some uplift around finances as soon as it arrived in Pisces last week. This is still not the time to be too free and easy with resources. That said, you could find out something on Thursday with the Sun square to Chiron. Someone may tell you something, someone who actually really cares about you, that's more revelatory. It could be an observation about how they see you and how you respond, particularly to criticism. It could be painful, but you can gain from this. And then on Friday, as the North Node inverts back into the sign of Pisces for the first time in 17 years, it's really going to help you to understand more about what you value and what's really valuable in your world. Because Saturn has perhaps been a bit of a wrecking ball, perhaps had quite the impact on income, but quite the impact on your sense of self, who you are, what you represent. The North Node can restore that, but there is still endeavour and application required, particularly as the two do link through the spring months in the north and the autumn in the south. So as this week draws to a close, you need to accept the 12th house energy of the Sun and Mercury. Could be a bit of a need for reflection, but just be aware that there may be some people around you who are not as honourable as you, not as honest as you, or may have hidden agendas. And it's important, if you are stepping forwards with that opposition between Mars and Pluto at the very start of this week, to stand up where you are on a particular situation, that your facts are cast iron solid. Have a great week, Aquarius. And if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this one. So Pisces, your week commencing the 6th of January forecast has the exciting arrival of the North Node in your sign. That occurs on Friday, the point of destiny, late on in the day in universal time. But also, you do have Mars, the planet of passion, inverting into your 5th house, a brilliant place for Mars to be later on Monday. If you have been encountering some conflicts about work or perhaps some psychological issues in terms of your energies being lower than you would like, and perhaps feeling that life is a little overwhelming, it wouldn't be a surprise. So Mars inverting back into Cancer through to the 18th of April gives you a chance to get into those creative parts of your nature, which is really good for you. Now, work may have been a hard part of your situation for some while, partly because of communicational problems. Perhaps you're not being kept informed as much as you should be. Perhaps you're not being given a clear framework of what to work within. Perhaps the organisation you work within has an uncertain future. And part of that is because Mercury, the planet of communication, has been in a very visible part of your chart, perhaps encouraging you to learn new skills. But it does start this week in a conflict with Neptune in your sign. And it has clashed with Neptune before, but also with Saturn through its journey because of its retrograde. But it's going to be moving into a much more productive area on Wednesday. And also Mars forges a delightful link to your ruler Neptune in the early part of this week as well. So better vibes are starting to come through. Then later in the week, the Sun in a friendly and collaborative part of your chart, great for socializing, links with Mercury's help now, of course, to Uranus, the planet of innovation. If there are people that you can collectively work with and enjoy it, and you have shared ideas or beliefs, those are relationships which can come to life really productively. Unfortunately, your traditional ruler Jupiter is still blocked off by Saturn in your sign. If you have been feeling a bit inhibited, particularly around a very sensitive emotional family or home-based issue, that may still be there. And the fact that we do have a quarter moon at the start of this week, and also the square between Chiron and the Sun on Thursday, suggests it is important to really be clear about what you stand for. Sometimes we can get caught up in the material world, and that's because that physical security is a big part of what makes us feel at ease emotionally. But because your nature is to flow, if you're in any way limiting yourself, contact with that more spiritual dimension of your nature, that's not good for your soul. And on Friday, the North Node, the point of destiny, returning to your sign after a 17-year absence, is a fantastic opportunity to start to get much more in touch with what's really much more atmospherically and sensitively important to you, particularly as the node immediately connects to Neptune, your ruler. So this is a week which could start off with the turbulence that's been to the fore recently, very much prevalent, perhaps feeling a little overwhelmed by it. But as the week goes on, much greater clarity is going to develop for you, and that's going to make you feel a lot happier. Things won't necessarily move at the speed of light. There's still internal work to be done, but some of the lock-in feeling that you've had and perhaps a limitation on your options can just start to ease off. It's been a pleasure being with you. Have a great week. And if you've yet to watch your year 2025 deep dive video, please see the link beneath this one.